All right, we're going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. If we could rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Commissioner Seguino, you have the unlucky task of calling roll because it happens to be right in front of you.
Indeed. Brian Chena. Liz Curry. Here. Kyle Dodson. Kevin Garrison.
Here.
Charlie Giannoni.
Here?
Patrick Holliday.
Here.
David Kirk.
Here.
Kat Kleeman. Alan Matson. Mark Porter.
Here.
Stephanie Seguino. Here. Scott Shumsky. Miriam Stoll. Here. Ben Truman.
Here.
Xander Long. And Georgia Essig. Okay.
If we could get a motion to approve the agenda. Commissioner Giannoni, seconded by Commissioner Truman. I would like to make one very small amendment to the agenda that by accident there was a presentation from the Partnership for Change that was left off the agenda. So if we could, we do need a 2/3 vote of those present in order to add to that agenda. Commissioner Gina?
Do you need a second for the motion?
Probably, just for.
Well, I'll make the motion or second the motion.
Okay. Amended agenda, all in favor?
Can you discuss?
Actually, we can't discuss the agenda. It's not, I mean, it's not a debatable item.
So I don't know how long we're going to be here.
It's only going to be, it's only a 10-minute presentation. It should have been on the agenda, but it didn't get to me. So, and there are teachers who are coming to present. So, and they'd already prepared to come forward. Yeah, all in favor of the agenda?
Aye.
Opposed? First up, we have some folks from the Sustainability Academy, some students here.
Yes, and I've asked Principal Brian Williams to do the introductions.
My name is Brian Williams, and I have the honor to be the principal of the Sustainability Academy in Burlington. And I brought my friends with me today, Shika and Samir. Come on up. And they had a lot of good questions as they were preparing for this evening. One of them was, do we get to meet the big boss? And they did. They got to meet Dr. Smith. And the other one was, are we going to be famous? And I said, absolutely, because RETN is going to be covering this. And we can see you on Channel 17 on Cable News Access. I have a brief overview of the project that you're going to see in just a minute. A big part of what we do at the Sustainability Academy is around education for sustainability. And sort of the three teaching pillars we have are place-based, project-based, and service learning. Really, it's around experiential education. How do we get kids learning by doing? So this particular project actually incorporates all three of those, place-based, project-based, and service learning. Here we go. At the Sustainability Academy, and we get to ask them questions later, at the Sustainability Academy, partnerships between the school and local organizations that provide services to the community are an integral part of our philosophy and practice. Our goal is that when we work with a local organization, the partnership is mutually beneficial. The children went to Bike Resource Vermont, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to get bikes to low-income families in the Old North End. The students went there to learn about upcycling and recycling concepts, which they brought back and applied to their school store, which now sells upcycled and recycled goods. While at Bike Resource Vermont, they interviewed Dan, the director, who explained that they were having trouble connecting with new arrival families. The students came up with the idea of making videos in different languages to help Bike Resource Vermont reach these families. Working with BSD's language liaisons, they made 3 videos in Mai, Bhutanese, and English. So this is a link that's on Deirdre Morris's website. She is their teacher. She wasn't able to be here tonight. I'd like to share the video with you, and then maybe we can ask them a couple questions. Please work. This is that moment that you just hope it works.
Former bike recycleमा स्वागत छ।
बाइक रिसाइकल मङ्गलबारदेखि शुक्रबारसम्म 1 बजेदेखि 5 बजेसम्म खुला हुन्छ। साइकलको लागि योग्य हुन यहाँ केही तरिकाहरू छन्।
बाइकको दामहरू न्याय छन्। बाइकको दाममा $10 सुरु हुन्छ। बाइक ल्याएन आज आउनुहोला। हामी माया गर्छौँ।
And it's that simple. So we have a partnership with Local Motion. All of our students take a 2-week bike unit in the fall and a 1-week bike unit in the spring. We had a wonderful grant and we were able to purchase 40 bicycles from them. And so our students, when they do field trips, they will use bicycles to go to North Beach or to go around. Part of our concept is expanding circles of inquiry, and we want our students to sort of see Burlington as their campus. So, did you guys have fun with that project? Okay. And what's your favorite part about the Sustainability Academy? Shika?
When you dress in funny costumes.
When I dress in funny costumes and recess? Thank you. And Samir, what's your favorite thing about Burlington?
PE and recess.
PE and recess? Great. Do you guys like learning by doing?
Oh yeah.
Do you like being active?
Yeah.
Did you have fun with this project?
Yes.
Excellent. Do you have any questions
Yeah,
for
the
our
board
friends?
members that might have a question.
Sure.
Commissioner Curry?
I don't have a question. I just want to say तपाईँको भिडियो राम्रो छ and धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद.
Whoa. Thank you very much for your support of Burlington Education. Oh, I'm sorry, please, Miriam.
I have a question. What is upcycling? I know what recycling is, but what is upcycling? I really don't know, so I'd love to learn.
Samir, can you tell us what upcycling is? Shika, can you tell us what upcycling is? You forgot? Can we get back to you? Can we send you an email with that
Love
answer?
an email.
Okay.
Ellen Stoll at BSD.
How's that? Now we've got homework. Good job.
Oh, sorry.
Any other questions for our friends? Sure.
What part of Burlington do you live in?
I was in the South Meadow.
Okay.
Samir, where do you live?
I forgot.
And what's your favorite subject at school? Your favorite class?
Music.
Music? You said PE and recess, right?
No,
Yeah, he said.
And lunch.
Samir and Shika,
Like lunch.
thank you guys very much for your presentation and for your good work.
We're gonna pack up and we're gonna get you guys home to bed.
Can I get you to grab the sign-in sheet off of the table there, just so we know? So, moving on to public comment. Let me read our little fun public comment. At this time, the board welcomes public comments and questions from the public, including staff and students. We encourage you to express your opinions on matters concerning any subject relating to the public education in general and the operations of Burlington School District in particular. The board is very interested in the opinions expressed during this public comment period. However, it is not a time to engage the members of the board in conversation or debate. Oh, and no one had signed up for public comment in advance. Is there anyone here who would like to? Hal?
Good evening, I'm Hal Colston, and I'm standing in for Jay Diaz, who asked me to share a statement with you. Jay is a staff attorney for the Disability Law Project at Legal Aid. His statement. Tonight, I encourage the Burlington School District Board to approve new policies that ensure pregnant and parenting students are afforded equal access to their education, and that they may receive that education in a discrimination-free environment. I applaud the work of the Burlington School District administrators and board members who have made this policy change possible. In addition to an updated district policy, the high school has also changed its own policies and procedures regarding pregnant and parenting students. These students will now receive detailed and user-friendly information regarding their educational rights and the educational options that they may voluntarily choose from during pregnancy and early parenthood. Furthermore, pregnant and parenting students will be regularly contacted by the school staff during any prolonged absences and to further placements in order to maintain their connection to the school. And the students will maintain all the rights and privileges of any other student in the district, such as participating in school-related events, clubs, sports, as well as access to the library, computer systems, and other facilities as appropriate. This is no small measure. It is a progressive policy that will be a shining example to other districts across Vermont and the nation. Thank you for taking the lead on this issue. Please approve the new policy and be proud of what the district is accomplishing. JDS.
Thank you, Hal. Anyone further for public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to the presentation from Champlain Elementary School on their data-informed decision-making process. And before we do that, I do need to pass on an apology that came from Commissioner Dodson this evening. He's had a death in the family and is not able to be here this evening. And but Stephanie Phillips is kind of coming in on representing the curriculum committee, as well as introducing the work that Champlain is doing. I believe I'm turning it over to you, Stephanie, then. Thanks.
So, Kyle asked if I would just speak a little bit tonight before the presentation begins from the Champlain teachers, just to set a little bit of context. The curriculum committee of the board has as one of their primary goals looking at early literacy, specifically looking at ways that we can, as a district, address students who may not be making progress or may not be reading on grade level by grade 3. So as a committee, there's been some work over the last few months to look at different parts of our system as a whole in Burlington and start to look at ways that we might look to do things differently and to look for successes that we're having within the system and how we might build on those successes. So in December, teachers from Champlain Elementary that you're going to hear from in just a few moments presented to the curriculum committee talking about a system that they have been building on this year. They have a new intervention block, and as part of that talked about how they as a team look at data and how as a school they use the data-driven decision-making process. So they're going to share that information with you tonight. Again, that connects back to the early literacy goal of the curriculum committee of the board. I would also just like to say that this work is also very much tied to some of the restructuring work that the senior administrators are currently discussing with Superintendent Smith regarding ways that we might look at things differently for next year. I know that you've been introduced to the idea through the budget process of the interventionists. And one of the ways that we hope to sort of strengthen the work that you're going to see tonight from this team at Champlain is to be able to use our content coaches and the interventionist positions to do more of this collaborative work, looking at student data and making informed decisions through intervention blocks, but also through the first best instruction that happens in the classroom. So this ties very nicely the work that these teachers are going to present, not only to the goal of the curriculum committee of the board, but also as part of the restructuring work that we're looking forward to doing in the months ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, because we know that you're all very, very busy, and we appreciate the fact that you've offered us some time tonight to share with you. We have a few slides to focus our discussion, and I'm Leslie Coulomb, principal at Champlain. And we have here tonight Catherine Bricken, who's a grade 4 teacher, Sarah Legault, grade 4 teacher, Stacy Eisner, special educator, and Terry Ryan, special educator. So I'll get us going, and then the classroom teachers will talk specifically about what the data-driven decision-making looks at their grade level, and then Stacy and Terry will finish up with some preliminary data that we have so far from September to February. So we really are committed to putting the learners first, And the way we got to this point is over the last 7 years, it's been quite a journey. We started out articulating a vision and mission statement 7 years ago. And then in the last couple of years, through a process called the Green Mountain Star Action Planning process through the Agency of Education, we read about 65 excerpts of best practices. And a part of those best practices was to go back and revisit that vision and mission. So we did that last year during August in-service, September and October faculty meetings, and we came up with some shared commitments. And you'll see on the screen, that we really believe that there is lifelong learning and connecting the academics to real life. You'll also see the next to last bullet is that ongoing progress monitoring. And that's what we're talking to you about tonight, because that's what drives our instruction with the children. We believe that these shared commitments that we created around student learning have to drive our instruction. And we also learned over the last couple of years that they've got to drive our schedule, our master schedule as well. So we took the past 2 years to really study what other schools had done in the area of what we call multi-tiered systems of support. And that just means really differentiating the learning and making sure that we're providing opportunities to accelerate the learning for struggling learners, and also that we're providing opportunities for enrichment and challenges for those learners who have already demonstrated that they've met and exceeded the standards. So this year, we have a new schedule in place. And the next slide will show you what our non-negotiables are. So as a leadership team last year, we came up with some non-negotiables, the critical criteria of our scheduling. And we presented this and shared this with the full faculty. And first and foremost, we realized that we needed to maximize uninterrupted instructional time. And what we mean by this is Stephanie said that it's so important that first core instruction, the initial instruction that the classroom teacher does. We wanted all children to be in the room when that was happening for both literacy and mathematics. And prior to this, we would often see children being pulled for various services. We wanted that to stop. And we said in order to have all the children in the room, we then needed to create a time period where we could really differentiate. And so that's what we've done this year. We've added what we call boost into our schedule. We have a reading boost and a math boost, and it occurs 4 times a week for both of those subject areas. And at that time, we're able to work with children in smaller groups. So we're able to use research-based instruction, research-based programs to accelerate the learning of those students that haven't met the standards. And then we've also been able to provide opportunities for enrichment and challenging for the students that have demonstrated that they've met those standards. And because our teachers use the data in an ongoing way in their professional learning communities, these groups are flexible. So children are coming in and out of various groups based on what they're showing us they need and what they can do. So I'm going to turn it over to Catherine and Sarah, who will talk to you more specifically about the professional learning communities.
So one of the critical aspects of the success of this is the fact that we have the gift of time on Wednesdays with the professional learning communities. And so during this time, it really gives us a chance to truly collaborate, and not just collaborate as a grade level team, but it gives us a chance for our special educators to collaborate with us, for our ELL teacher to collaborate with us, for us to lean over to another grade level and say, hey, what happened last year with this particular student, or do you have an idea from a grade above on how to enrich students? You come to the table really viewing that all the students are our students. So Sarah and I job share a classroom, but we have another team member. So it's not that we have 22 kids, we really look at it as we have 44. Leslie had mentioned the idea of flexible grouping, and we're just going to kind of explain it a little bit deeper, that you have constant opportunities to interact with data, and so if a student is put into one group, it doesn't mean that that student is going to stay there for the rest of the year. It might just be 2 weeks. We recently had a math boost where it literally took about 2 weeks to up them where they needed to be, and then they were back in the enrichment group. So it's really that idea that you're constantly looking at what they call fresh data, which means data that's kind of occurring right now, so that you really can have those flexible groupings. When we're sitting there together as a team, we're looking at student work. I'm actually going to share with you in a few moments a document that Maureen Barber, who's a consultant for the district, and Karen Vogel and I and Graham actually worked on to create a data analysis sheet for the Fontes and Pinnell data, which Sarah's going to talk about in a moment. It's a deep analysis of student data. It's not just quickly looking through it. Sometimes you're really looking through the work to find multiple different areas of strengths, but also multiple areas of improvement. And then for us at Champlain, this was kind of the newer part this year, is taking that time not just to analyze student work, but also to take the time to actually plan instruction. I feel like before we would analyze the work and we'll say, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, and not really take the time to say, what are some of the different strategies that, what are you doing, what am I doing, and how can we make sure that we're providing the best instruction. And to use a variety of types of assessments, and Sarah's going to lead us from here.
And there's 3 types of assessments that we use. We use the progress monitoring, and we use the summative assessments at the end of our instructional units, and then we use daily formative assessments. The progress monitoring is district-wide. In literacy, it occurs 4 times a year, and what we assess is students' comprehension, fluency, accuracy in their reading. And for math, we start out at the beginning of the year, and we assess what they would learn at the end of 4th grade, and then we're able to show growth. We just gave that assessment in January, and that really helps us with our next steps as we're ongoing to the end of the year.
So, pardon me. This is the sheet that I was alluding to, and I guess the point that I want to point out is that this gives teachers a chance to kind of identify 2 cohorts of students. So you can kind of think of this as like, this is the midpoint of the year. So we've got a couple of more months. What are we going to do for these kids? And we're looking at kids who, according to that assessment, didn't make progress. So even if they were on grade level, they just kind of are stagnant. And then looking at those students who are not meeting the standard and below grade level. We took it a step deeper by having them look at, based on the test, what were the areas of strength and what was the area of weaknesses. But then, I don't know if you can even read it. Oh, I guess you can. Thinking a little bit more about, what instructional goals have classroom teachers actually taught in the last 2 or 3 months. So what is the instruction that they've actually received? What standards were you actually teaching? And what does the instruction look like for this child? So is this child being pulled out? Is this child getting push-in services? Is this child receiving ELL support? So kind of looking at the whole picture of the child to figure out next steps for those particular students. So Sarah had mentioned progress monitoring. Another type of assessment is formative assessment. And sometimes the lingo is exit cards. So that's the idea of more daily assessments. So at the end of a lesson, you give a quick little question that helps you understand if the student grasped that day's learning target. So it might be something as simple, you see some student work right here. It's one fraction problem that had to do with the whole lesson. And it's a quick way for teachers to be able to kind of make piles. These kids get it, these kids don't, and this is why. And these kids, might just have a little tiny misunderstanding. Another way to access it, the picture where you see Sarah's teaching a group, that is a boost group. So it's a pretty large group, but that is an enrichment group. So kids who have met the standard and really need more of a challenge. And we use journaling for that so that they're doing daily written responses. And it gives us a chance to look at their responses and again, see if they were understanding the lesson or not and what our next instructional steps should be.
And our summative assessments evaluate the learning at the end of a unit. We're able to give them feedback immediately and also find out what our next steps are going to be. Usually during our PLC time, we meet and we talk about that data right away so we can make an action plan to determine the intervention and also students that need to be accelerated. We do have a student example too on a writing example.
So this was a student who was in a group that was able to write paragraphs, but when they had a detail, they weren't able to elaborate on it. And so this lesson was really around how to take something and actually elaborate on it. So he says, I'm trying to read all of the DCF books this year. One reason I want to do this is because I will have read a ton of really good books. I also want this because I would be inspired for my own writing. I have been looking for some new ideas for good writing. Above all, our librarian, Mrs. Ames, says there will be something special if you do read all of them. This is even more exciting because the special thing is a mystery. I can't wait, bless you. I can't wait until I read all the books. It would be like finding clean water after being thirsty and stuck on a desert for a year. And so we are working on more creative endings and then elaborating on details.
Hi, I'm Stacy Eisner, special educator, and this is Terry Ryan, another special educator. So Leslie spoke to the fact that we did have to create a schedule that allowed for these boost groups to happen so that we could work with all students. And the way we as a special ed team addressed that, we kind of flooded grade levels. So all of the special educators would go in and work with all kids not meeting the standard and utilize research-based programs to help kids progress and move towards proficiency. So when we look at this data, we have the grades there, and we have the percentage of students meeting the standard or are proficient in September. So in first grade, we went from 75% of our students meeting the standard to in February, 80%. So it was an increase of 5% of students meeting the standard. Grade 2, we went from 56% of the students that were proficient to 82%. So that was a 26% increase in students meeting the standard. In grade 3, we went from 77% to 90%, which was an increase in 30% of students that were proficient. In grade 4, we went from 87% of students meeting the standard in literacy to 93%, which was an increase of 6%. And we weren't able to speak towards 5th grade because our data actually window ends tomorrow, and so we didn't have all of that information in. So we were really encouraged when we started looking at the data and seeing this increase of students meeting the standard and were proficient in literacy. So we looked at it a little closer because we wanted to see how this compared to last year. How do you move forward? What am I doing? Oh, okay. So we decided to compare the cohorts to see how they did from September to February last year and September to February this year. So we looked at what was our last year's first graders, and we noticed from September to February it was a 3% increase in proficiency, and this year it was a 26% increase with those same students from September to February. So it was a 23% increase in proficiency for those students. Then the last year's grade 2, this year's grade 3, we looked at it, and last year from September to February they made a 5% increase. 5% more percent of students were proficient in that time period. And then in grade 3 from this year, those same students went from, gosh, I'm getting myself confused. 13 more percent became proficient. So it was an increase of 8% more students became proficient in literacy. So last year's third graders, it was actually flat. The same number of students that were proficient in September were proficient in February. And so when we looked at those students this year, we had an increase of 6% of the students moving forward and gaining proficiency. And so we're really excited about this data. It's really showing that this MTSS or boost system is really working. Having our students in the classroom for the first grade instruction is really paying off, and we're just really excited to see this kind of sneak preview into our data.
And I think the important thing to note is that we work as a team. That all of us, and the way we use the data is we look at the whole school, and like right now I'm looking at, because I was at a curriculum meeting today, so I really didn't get to see the data until just now. And I'm like, so now we have to go back and relook at that first grade and say, okay, maybe we need to change groups, what can we do, and how are we going to do that? you know, and then move forward with that, and hopefully the data will be even better at the end of the year.
Any questions that people have?
Commissioner Chena.
What barriers do you see at this? What barriers do you see at this point ahead of you for any further progress? And that's one question. The second is there anything that you think we could do to help? Because we're like, you know, removed from you, but is there anything that the school board could do to help?
One of the things that we did that was, one of the things that was a little bit different this year was that we have an intervention system that we're using, that we have for second, third, and fourth grade, but we don't have, or first, second, and third grade. We don't have all the materials for all of those grades. We use our own materials and things like, and multiple copy libraries. So there's those kind of basic things that we need to then move forward. And then I'm going to bring up a question that I brought up today. I'm a little bit, with the way things are, the way the budget is moving, and that next year we're going to have literacy specialists and math interventionists and specialists and things, we're a little bit nervous because it's working so well, and we've always done this sort of team approach where we're special educators, but we work with all students that are at risk, and that's been the belief ever since I've been at Champlain. And the reason it works is because we can team. It's not like one person is doing all those at-risk students at a certain grade level. It would be impossible, frankly. And that we, as a team, look at, we're really thoughtful about who we see and who, you know, who works with that student. We have kids with behavioral challenges, and we have one special educator this year who focused on those students, and it gave us the opportunity to not be interrupted during instructional times when we were working with other kids. So he can create those plans that really work with those students, and then as those kids move into groups and are behaving better and making their own progress, then he can do more instructional groups as well, which has been really wonderful.
Is that a position that's going to be lost?
Well, it's confusing because on paper, we were just talking about that today, but then we also got an email at the end of the day saying that we could apply for this new position about a literacy specialist. So the way, and I don't know if you can speak to that or not, but it is a little bit confusing because we feel like we're just, you know, like, it's working. Oh my gosh, it's really working, and we're working, and I'm just afraid of getting the rug pulled out from under us, I guess.
So, but I think we have a way to bring clarity to it because with the redesign, there is the literacy specialist position and the math specialist position. And so what we would do then is that our team look at the expertise that we have. And the fact that we use the data to drive those instructional decisions, we wouldn't say, oh, that special educator can only work with students on individualized educational plans. If there's a student that's on an educational support team plan or a 504 plan that has a need, they will be grouped in that group, you know, based on their needs. So I think that we can bring clarity to this new redesign. We just have to work through it. We're all in the beginning stages of hearing about it.
There's a little healthy skepticism, but also, if you remember the words I used today, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So we do, what I reminded them is that not every school has accomplished what they've accomplished in terms of the teaming aspect, and that really is the goal of the redesign, is to take away the labels around, you know, some of the specialists who are working with children and make sure they're working as a team with the broader range of students who have needs. And one of the things that I think was particularly noteworthy about this that often gets lost today because of, for all the obvious reasons around concerns and proficiency, you will notice there are several times when they made reference to students who need more, who need to be challenged, who need an opportunity for enrichment or acceleration. And that's a very powerful aspect of this. It's a dimension that we shouldn't forget. And so it's another example of how they as a team, and by using this data and not thinking in just one way about the needs of students, but across the spectrum, it becomes a very powerful model. So they're basically the poster children for what we want to do in the other elementary schools. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure that everyone had a sense of the kind of work that they're doing. It's an example of these little nuggets that I'm discovering as I wander around the district of really, really good work.
Commissioner Porter?
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering if you're looking at this as to exactly what we actually see up there, even though there's not a truth of a reflection up there, but that you'd be experiencing a diminishing return through the grades. So you have a target population in first grade. Let's say you have a 40% deficiency in first grade, and you take away 20% of that. Coming into the following year, you only have a 20% target to hit again. So you take away, you get a 50% improvement on that. You only have 10% carrying over into third grade. So are you finding, or will it be any part of the assumption that's made on this that doing this at first or earlier would have I'd like to assume that that's money spent in those earlier years would give us would take away the need for so much money being spent later on, because you're hitting that target population earlier on.
As an upper grade teacher, because we loop with the students, so we teach 4th and 5th grade, and we've had multiple faculty meetings where we ask faculty for feedback, and I think that the 4th and 5th grade teachers do have it easier because there's not as many kids that are struggling, and that's because of the great work that's happening in the lower grades.
I have one of the quick question. What do you do about the new students to the new second grade or new third grader that didn't get the chance or the opportunity to experience your first grade efforts? What do you do with that population of students that come into the school?
Well, they just like anybody else, we take them from where they are, and they probably fit into one of our groups and move them forward.
You would start with an assessment. So if you get a new student, the very first thing you would do is, at least with reading, you would give the font system to assessment to see where they are. Oftentimes that information comes over because that's a really common assessment used all over. Math is a little harder.
Commissioner Clayman?
I think my question was answered, but I was just curious as to if this was going on in other elementary schools to any extent, or...
I think SA,
yeah.
So yeah, all schools are looking at data, and all schools have different models. This presentation that you heard tonight, the boost, is unique to Champlain in how they did their research and put this into place this year. But there are different models throughout the district for both looking at data and having some intervention.
Thank you.
Commissioner Curry?
Yeah, just a related question, I guess, is then in terms of, it seems like if this is the model for the district, or, I don't know if it's viewed as the most successful, but it seems very exciting and promising. And so I guess I'm wondering what the conditions need to be, what kind of conditions need to be present in the school in order to achieve, this kind of success. And, in terms of our other elementary schools, which ones, may need more focus in terms of bringing the conditions about that will, generate this success as well.
I think one thing that you heard in the presentation tonight that, from my perspective, sort of sets this model apart from others, Leslie said in her opening comments that they really knew that they had to approach the schedule differently and really protect that time, that first best instruction time for all students in the classroom, and not to have that time be interrupted by either services that are being pushed into the classroom or children being pulled out. So it was a very different way of thinking about scheduling. And in my mind, that's one of the ways that really sets the Champlain model apart from what we see in most of the other elementary schools. We see schools that are working very hard to develop interventions and to think about enrichment and to look at their data. But I think what we are seeing this year is really being serious about your schedule and how you use your time and the time that you protect and how you really build those blocks and honor that first best instruction time. So for me, I think that's one of those really, really key things that we're seeing is paying off from the data that we have so far this year. And I think that's The biggest thing that I would say is really going to be important for our other elementary schools to look at as they start to go into the spring and think about their particular schedules. So they may have some things during their intervention time that are working really well, but I think what we're learning here is that dedicated time in the schedule appears to be making a real difference.
We are working across the 6 elementary schools on issues around consistency and specifically relating to scheduling and the time allocation for certain kinds of things. So this will enter into our conversations very timely because we just had a meeting yesterday, wasn't it, when we were talking with the elementary principals about scheduling and identifying criteria for scheduling that will advance the kinds of objectives that we're trying to achieve. So this is exactly the kind of thing that will factor into the scheduling conversation for the other buildings as well.
Commissioner Kirk?
So I see this is very young in its infancy, and I see scheduling was one of your major hurdles. Is there any other hurdles, any other problems you're having getting this underway that could try to make this work better so that we could move it out of and into the other schools?
So by putting in, it supports the schedule of intervention and boosts, but by putting that in, it took away other teaching time. So we've sent out a couple of surveys to the faculty, and that was one of the feedback is like, when, are other things, I don't want to say suffering, but are you not being able to meet other things because you're doing this during this time? Does that make sense? Yeah. So there might be like more, which we should be doing anyway, more integration of, writing with science and social studies so that you're getting that writing block in. That's one of them.
The other barrier really is the resources. In order to implement the research-based programs, they are costly, but they're effective. So the two major research-based programs that we're using is the Fountas and Pinnell Leveled Learning Kit, literacy kit, and then in math it's called Do the Math. And both research-based programs are costly, so that is a bit of a barrier.
And another one is the Fast Forward.
Yes, Fast Forward.
Thank you guys very much for your presentation this evening. Thanks for coming out, and thanks for the good work that you're doing, and appreciate your time. Thank you. Next up on our agenda, we have Susie King and Beth Evans, who are going to do some presentations. And while they're coming up to give their brief Partnership for Change update, or this month's Partnership for Change update, I do want to say that what we just saw from Champlain is, or I should say really from the Curriculum Committee, is representative of what we'll be seeing from other committees each month, where one committee is going to have an extended amount of time to present on some of the work that they'll be doing. And this just fit in well with the work that was being done already by the discussion that was taking place at the Curriculum Committee.
I'm Susie King, and this is Eva, and we're partner teachers with the Partnership for Change. The last time that we were supposed to present to you was in December, and unfortunately my mother died, and so we weren't able to make it together, and instead Susie presented for us. So this time around, we would like to again extend the welcome to you to our classroom. We extended that welcome in December, and we have heard from Brian. Brian is coming tomorrow. We are very excited. We like visitors in our classroom. And we also think it's very important that those of you who are making budgetary decisions and systemic decisions for our students know who the clientele is. And ultimately, that is the students who we're serving. Ooh, Eva, you want to do it? Yeah. So, we're presenting on lessons learned tonight, things that we've learned by doing the class that we're doing. We teach a class called Excel, which is brand new this year. It's a new way to approach English language learners. We take those deer in headlights kids, the ones who we can't see, the ones who we talk to and we say, hi, how are you? And they say, my name is. They are the ones who really can't communicate yet. And so we give them a little bit of language so that they can actually exist within the classroom. They can follow one-step directions so that they understand when their teachers say circle, underline, those kind of things. And what we found is that students like our class. The ones who we have graduated out of our class into English 1, and our colleague is sitting back there in the back, Kevin gets all the people who we push out. He started out with 1 student at the beginning of the year because we knew it was going to fill up, and now he has 15? It was 17, and we moved a whole bunch of them over to English 2. So we're trying to move students up as their proficiency levels increase. And what we did was we had a survey. We asked students about our class, about what they liked about our class, what they didn't like about our class, and we actually had students interview other students in their first language. And the reason that we did that is because anytime we ask the questions, they say, "Oh yes, miss, it was great. Oh yes, miss, you are wonderful. Yes, it is good." And we wanted truth. We wanted to know, does our class feel babyish? Does this feel wrong to you? Because I can tell you that when I was 17, if somebody asked me to slap hands with somebody, grab their ankle, and hop around in a circle, I probably would not be very accommodating to that. However, our students are. They are amazing, and they like our class. Those are a few of our students right there. And what we also notice is that Kevin's classroom is really, really loud. When I taught English 1 last year, my classroom was not loud. My students were quiet, and they didn't talk to each other. What we're noticing is that by giving them a little bit of survival English before we push them into those classrooms, that they really are able to communicate with each other and really bridge language barriers across cultures. And we are so excited about that. You want to just sit back there with Eva?
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Awesome, I'll just keep on going.
I have some more to say.
All right, lesson 2. They keep coming. Oh my gosh, they keep coming. We got a new one last week. We had a new one last month. We have 2 more coming this week. And I have another student I'm testing tomorrow. I don't know where he's going to end up. So they keep coming. It's not like our class is emptying out and then there's no more need for us. They keep coming. We hear from the RISNet that there are about 40 more Nepalis that are going to be resettled here in the next month. And that's only the Nepalis. There's also the other populations that are coming too. So this is not going to go away. Therefore, our cup overfloweth. What is happening now is that when we push our students out of Excel, because they have gotten that basic level of communication, there are no more places to put them. We are having to overfill classes. Again, Kevin is teaching Science 1, and he now has 20 bodies in that room where young adults hardly speak any English at all. And that is a momentous task for anyone. It's hard to have a room full of 20 bodies anyway, but to have 20 bodies where they don't really speak English is incredible. And so Kevin we love him. He's amazing. But we don't have room in social studies because there are 21 students and 20 desks. There's the ELL math class now has 23 students with a teacher who's not really trained in teaching ELL students. We have many, many classes that these students need to get into and simply can't because we don't have those low-level classes. When I went to the administrators and said, listen, there's this problem, I was told, we can't start the year with classes at 0. And I get that. I understand. But at the same time, what do we do with these kids? We're having them come in and they get half schedules. They get 4 classes, maybe, if they're lucky. And the reason is because PE is full, because music doesn't start over at the semester, because all the rest of our low-level classes are full. And I can tell you that if I changed schools mid-year and my daughter started at VHS and I was given half a schedule for my daughter, I would be yelling to you. Because I would be saying, I don't want my 14-year-old coming home at noon and staying by herself at home. Our parents don't have that voice. But if they did, I'm sure they would be telling you the same thing. Because I hear the same thing from our homeschool liaisons who talk to me daily and tell me we need to have full schedules for these kids. We can fill them up with study halls, but what good does it do to give them study halls when they don't really have a lot of homework? So, lesson 3. Change needs to happen. Change is coming now. Our population is changing, and we need to address that change. We need to meet these students halfway. We are still living by the same rules that you and I lived by, that my parents lived by. You skip a class, you stay after school. You skip after school, you stay for Friday school. You skip Friday school, we put you in ISS. And so then they miss the classes that they actually do attend. So I don't know what the solution is, but I think that it lies in restorative justice, and I think that we need to be moving in that direction. I think that these kids need connections. They need for us to know them, and it doesn't really happen right now. It happens in very few classrooms. All changes are preceded by chaos, and that is where we are right now, right, Eva? We are in chaos. And so we just wanted to share that with you. Lesson 4, it takes a village. Right now, we are not in the situation that we need to be in order to teach these students the way we would like to. We have segregated classes in which math is separate from English, is separate from PE, is separate from everything else, and we're not using the same language no matter how much we try. Bye, Eva. And so we really, really need to find some way in our curriculum to be able to unite that in order to embrace these children, welcome them into our community, and make sure that they are well taken care of. Because when they don't, these become your problem. Because they drop out, because they don't do what they're supposed to do, and then they end up in the criminal justice system, and then we all pay. And that is the reality. So, we would like to welcome you to our class to see the reality that we are facing. Come tomorrow. Come Friday. Come next week. Come. Come see the students who we are teaching, because there are students at BHS that don't know that our students exist. That's okay, because our students don't know that they exist either. And I'm sure that when you think of the typical student, you think of people like my daughter, who looks like you, who talks like you, who had the same classes that you do. But we don't think about these other kids. So this is our schedule. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 9:35 to 11:16. Wednesday, 10:15 to 11:37. Roughly, we don't really know our Wednesday schedule, but that's sort of when we're there. We would love to have you there. We would love to see each and every one of your faces. I applaud you for the work you do, because I could not sit here and listen deeply to what you all have just listened to. I could not sit here and listen to each one of your jobs and the minutiae that go into it. But I do think it's important as decision-making people that you come and see us. Do you have anything to add? Was I impassioned enough? Awesome. Do you have any questions?
Thank you for that. I want to, applaud your passion as an advocate for these kids. And I want to tell you that we hear you. And that I would like, as chair of the Diversity and Equity Committee, I'd like to talk to you more. And I think that it's important to dig into some of these issues and address these concerns. I want to say that I want to say again that we hear you. We also have full-time jobs, and it's not easy for all of us to be there, but please don't take that as a sign that we're not committed to helping resolve these issues. So I want you to just understand that for some of us it's impossible to get away. This kind of presentation is invaluable, and I'd like to be in more contact with you and get more information, talk to the superintendent.
Business cards. I would love to hear from you and any questions that you have. And I am so available to you if you want to ask me questions. So,
Commissioner
there
Clayman.
you go. Dozens. Bought them just for this. All right, anything else?
Can I just show up?
Yes.
Do you need to know
Do
anything?
not,
I've been planning on
don't
this
worry
for a
about
while,
calling us up. Just show up.
Just come.
Because, if it's a chaotic day, you need to see that too.
No, that's good.
I don't want to plan for you to be there.
Oh, good.
That would be awesome. Walk in. Do that.
Commissioner Curry?
I also want to thank you for coming back and sharing, in such a concrete way, your experience, and just observe as well that one of the reasons I got on the school board was because of my opportunity to get to know many of the students that you teach, just from my son going to Barnes. And that I'm aware that, unfortunately, when Burlington, welcomed newcomers to our community, we had an approach in the school district that was based on a very, very traditional model that I believe was probably not well explored. And that there are models out there that I'm aware of that, offer a great experience for newcomers. And I think actually Hal had the opportunity to visit one of those models in Rochester, New York. And it's my hope that we can move in that direction. And I am one of the people who believes that, we need the leadership that will take us in that direction, and we haven't had that leadership. And, I also am a little, I guess I'm a little disappointed that we I'm grateful that we're hearing from you guys directly. I know that we also have an ELL director, an interim director, and that that position is still an interim position. And so it would be my hope that we, also focus on the kind of resources we need to have a robust program that would support you guys in the work you're doing on a more regular basis. So I just want to let you know that's where I stand, and thank you for the invitation to the classroom. I'm one of those people who probably won't be able to get away unless,
The sky falls, come.
Yeah, no, I know the sky is falling for you all, but I just want to ask you to, I just want to ask you to know that, we definitely appreciate your commitment and your dedication, and it is a thankless job. And I know it's very different. Well,
it's very.
I know you probably don't, you feel like you're unrecognized maybe, or, by the community, but, that you are making all the difference in the lives of the kids that you are with every day and their families.
Commissioner Chena?
So I want to thank you for coming, and I think, to echo some of what you heard, besides having a full-time job, I also was doing the search for the superintendent, which was like another full-time job, and now that it's over, I'm really happy I'm able to make some time to come visit your class tomorrow. And I don't know, most people are probably working, but if anyone does have time tomorrow morning and you want to go with me, let me know. We can get a coffee, we can go together, we can make a little trip out of it. Huh? Yeah. I could. Do I have to bring it for all the students too? Or are they going to feel left out? Okay. Two coffees. I'll bring them. I'll bring them. But anyway, I just want to thank you for coming, and I guess I just wanted to extend the invitation if anyone wants to coordinate. I saw Kat wave her hand, and Scott told me he doesn't know yet, but he's interested. So there may be more than one of us tomorrow. And I don't want to take up more time now. Just thank you.
Thank you very much for your time and your work. It's appreciated. So at this,
give them an opportunity to? We'll give an opportunity to some of the teachers who may want to either plan lessons or sleep or do some other valuable activity. So, as fascinating as the rest of the meeting is, you're welcome to take your leave.
And actually, at this point, if there's someone who I would entertain a motion for executive session, for the appointment or employment of evaluation or evaluation of a public officer or employee where premature disclosure could place the district at a substantial disadvantage.
I'd like to make a motion to move into executive session for that purpose.
Commissioner Chena, seconded by Commissioner Garrison. All in favor of executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Real quickly, board report. I think we can go through quickly, in terms of the Superintendent Search Advisory Committee Ad Hoc Search Committee report. A huge thank you to the Advisory Committee, who has put in unbelievable amounts of hours and advice, guidance throughout this whole process. And if you know the people from your wards, from your schools, from your neighborhoods, please give them a thank you. And the board will give a formal thank you, but I think that from the community out there, it should know that there really has been active support from that. At this point, regarding the actual superintendent, the search process, there's nothing different to report than any discussion that, you know, that we are in conversations with a candidate, and
Sorry.
we made it down. I'm not sure. All right. We're in negotiations and hope very, very soon to have something concrete, and conversations have been positive. Kindergarten registration, just as a heads up for those watching at home, that the 20th of February, I think, is the deadline that has been set for the registration for kindergarten. I did.
Oh, I missed it.
And just another reminder that, so if you have a student who will be a kindergartner next year, to get to schools quickly and in the next week to ensure that that we have our accurate numbers. Town meeting day election is coming up, and there are, in addition to the election for the school commissioners, there are 2 additional ballot items. One, as always, is the budget, and the second one is the issue on Taft School. And with that, well, I guess that's not the first thing on yours. I will say that there's been this, just today, Superintendent Smith gave us a nice flyer explaining the process and talking about the Taft ballot question, as well as the new approach to building the budget. And without anything further, I'll turn over to you.
Yep. By the way, I'm going to pass this around. I'll ask you, as I mentioned on the note to you, I was hoping the copying gods would be with me, but they weren't. Our machines were broken down for 2-sided copying, so I just gave you one example to show what it looks like. We will be obviously doing 2-sided copies, but I'm going to pass this around. If you would just put your name down and give me an indication of the number of copies that you'd like, if you'd like to have some for any meetings that you'll be attending or any other purposes. Other than, you know, the electronic copy, just put a number down and we'll make those copies available to you. Just a couple of odds and ends on the superintendent report, and then I'm going to ask Nikki Fuller to talk a little bit about hiring. But just to finish up, you know, the budget reference, we are still working on some of the details associated with the some of the proposals that we've made for the FY16 year, and we're continuing to look for any other possibilities for savings along the way. We haven't stopped. And the budget is tight enough that it behooves us to find as many opportunities as possible where we might have a little flexibility. So that research is ongoing. We have what is really driving a lot of our work right now is a March 1st date when we need to notify any staff who might be affected by the need to have reductions in force. So we want to make sure that we get as detailed as we can prior to that date. A lot of our work has been designed to minimize the need to do this in the first place, but unfortunately there will be some cases where the design and the approaches that we've taken will translate to some reductions in staff. But I'll use that as a segue to the retirement situation. The program that you approved at our last board meeting has been very successful. We have received 19, I had 17 in my notes, but I got 2 more today. So 19 announced retirements of teachers, and then a couple of administrators as well. But the 9 of the retirements are positions where we were either, there was a full-time or a partial staff reduction involved. So, and that, we had kind of kept our eye, we knew who the eligible retirees were, and we had sort of paid extra attention in looking at staffing scenarios for next year to ways in which we might be able to absorb retirements and obviously minimize the need to reduce staff in other ways. So we're very pleased at this point that things are lining up in ways that will allow a number of the the reductions that we needed to make just to be absorbed through retirements. So it was a small amount of money per retiree, but it was well invested in terms of the results that we're getting and the planning that allows us to do now very early. And with that, just a couple other announcements, and now I'm going to turn it over to Nikki to follow up a little bit more. The implications of that, all this is, though, that because we have so many retirements, we also will have some hiring to do, and that's why I asked Nikki to come and talk to you a little bit about that. Just a couple other notes. Actually, only just one. There's been some excitement building around an announcement the mayor's going to make later this week on an early childhood initiative. We're excited to see the attention being paid in this area. The school district is going to be treated as a partner in looking at meeting the needs of young children, and our early education director has been a participant in some of the process leading up to the initiative. So we're looking forward to what the mayor has to say on that, and I think it'll be good news for all of our preschool children out there, right from infancy up to kindergarten age. That I'm going to ask Nikki Fuller. Nikki, why don't you take one of the seats where we have a microphone, and you can just...
Let me go over my junk.
I asked Nikki to talk a little bit about, we do have, and Nikki has done some work on this since she's been here, in putting together a hiring process that represents, have recognized good practices when it comes to hiring, and she'll walk you through a little bit of the process.
Hello. Hello. This is just sort of odd because I used to sit here for almost 12 years, so it feels really weird. Anyway, sorry to give you guys this evening, but Howard did ask me to speak to it, and I was just going to come and speak to it, and then I thought there's so many pieces to this process that it might be worth giving you guys some sense of what each piece is. And so if you have any questions, please feel free. Obviously, you haven't had a chance to read it. You can always give me a call. If you're curious about any parts of the process. So essentially, as Howard said, probably the most significant hirings that we typically do are teachers every year. Those are our most significant hires. And some of you may recall that last year we started a new process in the hiring process, which is what we did was we separated the determination of the pool from the actual interviews. And so the district actually determines who is considered qualified for the pool. So we have district screening committees, and those committees do include principals, central office personnel, as well as teachers. So they review all applications and make a determination as to who's qualified to be in the pool. Once that pool is determined and a school has a position that's open, a vacancy, they then contact HR, and we send them over that particular pool. So if they're looking for a fifth grader, we would send them over the fifth grade pool that has been reviewed by the district screening committees. And so eventually what they will do is they'll select from that pool, and then they'll have what they call their school interview team. So the schools at that point get to determine what their needs are at their particular school, and then they would evaluate those candidates and make their choice, and then ultimately the superintendent will review those choices. That one thing that we started requiring last year is that the superintendent be sent at least 2 candidates. It used to be 1, but I sort of thought that's not a choice, right, if you send somebody just 1. So they have to send 2, at least 2, for the superintendent to make a decision. And generally speaking, the superintendent interviews all candidates that are not previous candidates or who've worked in the district before, just because that could be a little bit time consuming. I won't go over with the composition of the district because it's kind of getting late, but if you have questions about that, let me know. The other piece that we have this year that we're doing, we started with teachers last year, but this year we're also applying this process as well to administrators. So that would include principals as well as central office administrator positions. So there will be district screening committees for those as well. Again, the district screening committees will be determining who's qualified for the pool. And then what would end up happening is whoever's department it is that there's an administrator for, we will create our our hiring committee, which is our SAC, sort of like what you've just been through, search advisory committees. So for example, with principals, what typically would happen is we would then screen those applications, determine who's qualified, and then the SAC would look at those applications, review them. They would interview the candidate. And then we also do a process where the public, meaning you know, teachers, students, parents, get an opportunity to create questions that they want asked. And so in the past, we've had 3 different meetings. Our goal this year is to sort of get that down to 2, because given the number of hires that we have, that's just going to be overwhelming to have that many meetings. So the goal will be to have 2 different meetings, and at those meetings, we would have the questions of the public, employees and the public answer. I was trying to think, was there any? That's really pretty much it.
Want to just mention about the training that committee members get?
Oh, yeah. All committee members are required, if you're on the DSC, meaning the District Screening Committee, you're required to complete 2 trainings. One is called, I won't give you my title, but it's anti-bias. You've been through it, Scott, the training on is unconscious bias in the hiring process. And then the second training is about cultural competency and how to evaluate cultural competency, because the DSC actually evaluates cultural competency based on an actual essay that is actually, there's certain things that people are supposed to sort of indicate, and you can score cultural competency in that way. So, and then the SIT, which is the school interview teams, they only have to complete the first part, which is the unconscious bias. They don't have to do the cultural competency, because by the time they get the applications, that has already been scored.
Questions? Yeah, Commissioner Segrino?
Nikki, can you tell me about the efforts to increase the diversity of the hiring pools? Do you have sufficient funding for job fairs, for advertising? Are you at all constrained in that regard? And just what are your plans generally for ensuring a diverse pool? And subsequent to that, is there any kind of policy you have that if a pool does not have sufficient amount of diversity, that you will extend the search?
But that was a lot of questions. So hopefully I'll get them all. In terms of, are we constrained? Yes, in fact, we are constrained. Our budget thus far has not been resolved. Our budget last year was supposed to be $160,000. Thus far, we've only received $92,000 of that budget. So in looking at job fairs, we have to sort of decide which ones. Last year, we did approximately 4 job fairs, and that was again with a budget freeze. And understanding the circumstances, we only went to 4 job fairs. Thus far, we've only committed to 2 job fairs, just because we feel that we may not be able to sort of. Most job fairs, just so you know, they're not free. You have to, many of them. We try to go to the ones that are less expensive, but it can cost as much as $3,000 to go to a job fair. We tend to do ones that are in under $1,000 job fairs. So we're doing 2. One, which you might understand why, we're doing one in Pittsburgh, which is a very popular one that gets has lots of diversity. At least the conclusion we've made, if we can get people who at least get the weather, we might actually get them to stay. So we're trying to find places that have similar weather, so that at least that piece of the culture shock is not there. So you have some other questions.
Advertising?
Yes, we are advertising, but our advertising budget, at least on the diversity side, is approximately, I think it's a little under $4,000. HR has approximately $4,000. So total, we have about $8,000. So we just sort of can pool that money, because it doesn't make sense for them to be separate anyway. At $8,000, in fact, we just did we were just trying to do an ad for the 4. We have the BTC position, the AP position at BHS. We have the Champlain principal position, and there's one more. Howard, can you think? There's a 4th one. I thought it was a fourth one, but anyway. So we have a number of really important positions, and so we decided to put them in Education Week, and we were quite shocked. I think Vermont, sometimes we just forget how the rest of the world works. And the ad for 1 week was $4,000. So so of course I ran to Howard and said, Howard, we can't do this. So we're doing a lot more sort of website type advertising, which a lot of people do anyway. And we are advertising, that costs money too, but we are advertising in affinity group type websites as well. So we are doing that at less expense, but again, with only $8,000, some of the places we might want to advertise. So we're penny pinching, and we get that there's a budget crisis, so we're trying to make sure that we are spending our money wisely. And one of the things we have done this year that had not been done in the past is we added to School Spring a question about where people are finding the information, where are they seeing it, so we can have a better idea of where we should spend our money, rather than, because we just sort of have a tendency to just do the same thing every year, Boston Globe, so we're trying to figure out where it is people are actually finding out our information.
So the second part of that was, do you have any kind of policy guidelines with regard to extending the search if the pool is not yet diverse?
We had, at least, again, I've only been here 2 years, but we haven't had that policy. It was sort of a case-by-case basis. Often, if I looked at a pool and felt that, because sometimes you'll get a pool in which you can't really expect it to be, but so diverse. So in certain cases, for example, in the sciences, we can expect them to be diverse, somewhat diverse, but we have difficulty getting women. There's a lot of things we have difficulty with. So if the pool is somewhat diverse, I might say, okay, we can tolerate this, whereas there's other areas that we would probably say, no, this is just not diverse enough. And it was on a case-by-case basis. There's no written policy, and certainly we should have one so it's fairly clear across the district, but currently there is not a written policy as to what constitutes the need for a failed search. Thanks.
Commissioner Shumsky?
Thank you, Nikki, for the information. Just one other question, which I know with the retirements, and we're trying to accept teacher retirements so that way we don't have to do layoffs. I'm not sure where you are in terms of hiring, but in recent history, just for a barometer, is that how many qualified candidates? I know in the past you've said, like, for every open teaching position we get X number of candidates. What is the district seeing for open teaching positions for qualified? So in other words, once you screen out the people who aren't right for the position, what's that pool look like per teaching position on average?
It would vary from each teaching position. Typically in the elementary school, we get about 70 applications. Probably about 50 of those will be qualified. And it depends, but there's different tiers to that. The first tier is, do they have the licensing and so forth? So you might get rid of 10 people on that because they don't have the licensing. And then there might be another 10 to 20 that just don't meet the other qualifications, the required qualifications. That's more once you do the interview type thing. So I would say on average, elementary, we may see qualify as many as 40 applicants. Middle school and high school tend to be different. They tend to be under 25, and maybe anywhere from 15 to 20 are qualified.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Curry?
Yeah, you mentioned, I missed something about your budget, that last year, your budget was 162. Was that fiscal year 14 or fiscal year 15?
It's fiscal year 15.
Your budget?
In fiscal year, maybe I'll just explain. Last year, we had started with 190, and in the process where people were sort of.
14.
No, it would have been this year.
Fiscal year
15, right.
190.
It started, and we put it, so when we went through that process, we said, well, we were asked, what could we give up? We thought we could give up $30,000 in professional development. I don't know if people recall that, but anyway. So it went down to 160, and I guess in the budget process somehow, we received 92. I have been working with Nate. We've been trying to talk about what can we actually live with, but it's certainly not 92. So we're still working
Maybe
on
it's a
that.
question for Howard. I'd like to understand better what happened or what is happening.
I don't think we
Well, that's
know.
that probably a question for Nathan. It's a good example, though, of the, that's a microcosm of the budget at large, where you couldn't, there were commitments to a budget amount, but then that's not necessarily the amount that appeared in the actual budget. And in some cases, it went both ways. Some cases, there was a commitment to reduce, but it wasn't reduced. In other cases, there was a commitment to have it at a certain level, but it came in lower. So that's one of the reasons why it's taking longer, as much time as it is, to go through, because for each question like that, each discrete one, we have to kind of track back and figure out what might have happened, and if that money is maybe somewhere else, or whether it just was never there. And, it's important to take the time to do that for obvious reasons. We're in the situation that we're in because sometimes an assumption was made that, well, it's got to be somewhere. And we don't feel we're in a position to do that. So we're trying to take the time to track these things down line by line and come up with, ultimately, that's what will contribute to what we expect by March, when our Finance Committee meeting in March, hopefully to be able to bring to the Finance Committee what we think is, in fact, a truly balanced budget for this year and how we're proposing to balance it. And we still need that much more time to finish the kind of work that I just talked about.
Commissioner Giannoni.
Two questions. So the first one is, you talked about a possibility of a failed search, but you do have to eventually hire someone in a timely manner. So what do you do if there's a failed search? Do you hire interim teachers, or what would you do there?
We don't typically have a failed search on teachers. That generally doesn't happen. It's usually around administrators that happens. The teacher pool is so large that if the selection that was made by that school, because we've had that happen where for some reason someone didn't take a job, or we can always go back to that pool because it's such a large pool. It ends up being, like I said, we can have as many as 70 people in the pool. So it's kind of hard to find no one in a 70-person pool. It's typically in the smaller, maybe even in a high school where you have smaller positions, sort of math where you might only have 10 people. Fortunately, we do actually have until July. We'd like to have it a lot sooner, but we have had to go into the summer on occasion, and I haven't seen it too many times where we've had to do that with teacher positions.
Okay, and can I ask about numbers? So especially just so the public understands. So the numbers I've seen in the past would say, said that 70% of the student body identifies themselves as white, but that is it the teachers, or is it the entire adult employment in the district is 90% white? Are those numbers?
That's the entire district. If teachers is is somewhere between 3 and 4%. We have approximately, because that number's been changing a little bit over the last year. We used to have about 435 teachers. It might be 420 now. And this year, 16 are of color, identify themselves as of color.
Thank you.
Superintendent Smith, anything further?
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go, please.
So I don't want to open a hornet's nest here, but I'm the very last line on the thing here. Final decision, the superintendent chooses the final candidate. Could you clarify for us about the role of the school board in determining or not determining the final candidate? Or maybe that's Dr. Smith. I just, after past history, I just love some clarity.
You know what? I thought about not even putting that in there.
I know.
Now you know why you thought that.
Right, exactly. Well, it's fairly simple. What I'm saying here is that ultimately the candidates sent from the school go to the superintendent. The superintendent usually sends you a single candidate, and that's licensed positions, obviously. So that would be teachers, certain administrators would be sent to you. So typically they would send you one candidate. They don't usually send you 2 or 3 for you to choose. Usually that's the superintendent's job, and they will send you Howard would send you the person that he believes is the the most qualified, and then you make a determination as to whether you agree or not.
So the school board does have the appropriate role for the school board is to yay or nay that final decision and has the right to
Correct.
make the final decision if that is the term.
Right, for all licensed positions.
All licensed positions. Okay,
Yes.
thank you for clarifying that.
Did you have anything further?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Consent agenda, if I can have a motion to approve, I'm sorry?
Actually, I had something for the superintendent.
Oh, I'm sorry.
During the budget hearings, I made a comment at some point asking to ensure that there's some transparency with how BHS makes its decisions relative to the budget, to have some kind of, and I don't know what that would be, process for people to be made aware of changes that may be coming as a result of decisions being made once the budget comes. I just wanted to make sure that I reiterated that because I think it's an important thing. It was something that last year I got feedback, people surprised of either rumors or such and such program is going to be cut, may be cut, and I just want to make sure that there's something actually happening systemically to ensure that people are within the BHS community will be made aware of what changes will be are being considered or being implemented before it's a done deal.
Well, just to back up, and before it's a done deal, there's one sort of mitigating factor, and that is the deadline around notifying staff of reductions in force. That's March 1st. The board won't have another meeting before then. We need to send out notices before then. Now, you have, and the public has, all the information right now that is available, it still reflects the stage we're at in terms of where we anticipated that. And we were quite specific. I can point to a slide on our budget that said, 0.8 social studies, one math. It showed exactly where the reductions would be at the high school. Now, that said, one of the things that we were trying to be careful about was looking at opportunities to consolidate under-enrolled classes and use that as the basis. So it's not just an arbitrary change in staffing. That information is being entered right now, will be available just going into the February break. And so that information will be processed and if there are other areas where we have under-enrolled classes that based on actual student enrollments, not what was hypothetical up until now, that could make some changes in ultimately where we see the potential need to reduce staff or not reduce staff. We would have to act on that at least in terms of the notification. Now, that's not final. There's intervening time afterwards. In other words, it's not, it's just notification. But the point is we will have to make those notifications, and it may look a little different depending on enrollment patterns than what is currently out there. It won't change in terms of the total number of the net staff reduction target, but the players could.
Okay.
So I just wanted to, there's not much way of avoiding that in terms of meeting our deadline to notify people, but it doesn't mean that notification is a done deal. It just means that contractually we have to notify anybody where it could happen.
Thank you. Okay, that goes a long way to address some thoughts. I would also want to make sure that the school administration is cognizant of staying ahead of any rumors, if there's any cuts in other programs, if we're talking about an extracurricular or an athletic or something where there's going to be a substantial change of some kind, that there's outreach going out about that so that we're not dealing with rumors at some point. Thank you.
Commissioner Shumsky?
Earlier I had correspondence with Superintendent Smith. I was questioning, one of the concerns that I've had since joining the board is the accountability down through the staff, which is whether that's doing an employee review of the superintendent, having that process in place and actually performing it, and then the superintendent performing that within the district, which of course is not our job, but it is our job to ensure it's being done. And one of the things that came to light is that I don't believe we finished it, but Dr. Smith is that the year that ended June 30th this past June. So I question whether the administrators for the buildings, the principals, had their employee reviews done. And it's my understanding is that that process was not completed for last fiscal year.
We don't have any written evidence that it was.
So we don't have any written evidence, and I'm concerned with the administrator who was in charge at the time is that that wasn't performed. I'm very concerned that if the leaders in all our buildings are not being, it's not even evaluation. It's just there's a vision from the superintendent, from the board. The board sets the vision for the district, and then the one employee who reports to us, the superintendent, takes this out to the district. And it's important that our building leaders are hearing from the superintendent on what that vision is, because if that doesn't happen, then basically we have 10 cowboys out there doing what they want in their building. And it's just, I find it very concerning about that this may not have happened. And I think it's very important is that going forward is that perhaps he mentioned he failed at retirement once, is that Dr. Smith is in the seat right now. Maybe Dr. Smith will be here next year. Maybe there'll be somebody else sitting here next year. But regardless, is I think that going forward, starting this new fiscal year, I've just asked the members of the board that this is an issue that we need to stay on top of. We cannot let it go 2 years where we're not seeing this type of accountability. And in fairness to the building administrators, this is not something to be meant negative. We've all worked in jobs where we get no direction from our superiors above. And that's not fair to the administrators. So it's just something I want to keep on people's radar. Thank you.
Commissioner Clayman. That's right.
Just, I have a clarification question, and part of it's because I was really, really sick and lost time. In terms of the budget and the social workers, has that sort of, are we still losing social workers? Last I had heard there might have been a way to kind of reallocate funding and do it a specific way, but is there still a net reduction going on?
There is, it's still all of the staff reductions that we originally proposed, since that was part of our initial budget proposal was a 2% increase, and it included all the staff reductions. So we're at 1.75, which has not at this point translated to any opportunity. We're still looking the other way. We're still looking for, going through our list of identified areas of savings to make sure that we can hit the 1.75 target. In a perfect world, when we're done, and we keep hoping, Nathan and I periodically are hoping that at some point he stumbles across a budget line that has money, in the positive direction that we didn't know about, and we might find ourselves in a different position, but we haven't really identified any margin, our contingency sort of margin sufficient to allow for us to reduce the number of positions that were slated for reduction. So right now that means that we're still with the original plan, which is the reduction of the social workers.
I have to say I'm fairly surprised about that, since there had been such a strong public outcry, and I'm actually very concerned. If we're still in the original position that we started with, I understand the difficulty of doing that, but so what?
We got the message, and the way the phrasing was in the board's approval of the budget, where the priorities were, but I just have to be honest and say we're not at a point where we've identified the money that would make it possible. We know if we did where we'd go first, but we're not there.
Commissioner Giannoni.
Just something quick. So does anyone on the board know if there's ever been a compilation of all the budget data for the public's consumption? Because I've never seen anything like this.
You can go online. It's usually produced every year.
Yeah.
So there is something like this? Because we've
go
done
back
many
years and years
NPA
and
meetings.
years.
I've never seen anything like this before. We could have used this at all those MPA meetings all those years. I was just curious.
I will say that this is actually much clearer in its presentation than previous years. There has been stuff in previous years, but it was like basically an Excel graph that was, or an Excel chart that was thrown up.
Yeah, this is excellent. So you said earlier that there are copies of this available?
Yeah, I want to make sure the list, did it get all the way around? Just let me know how many copies you want. And we're going to make two-sided copies for you. Thank you.
If I could have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Commissioner Chena, seconded by Commissioner Garrison. All in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Finance Committee report. Commissioner Stoll.
Oh, that was quick. Sorry.
That's all right.
So the minutes are up for our last meeting. You can take a look at them. I just want to say a couple of things. First, that we do have, do you remember the presentation we got about the various budget scenarios? So there is one with the 1.75. So Kat, if you want to look at that, you'll see that. So, and if constituents want to see it, all they need to do is go on our website and go to the budget page. You don't have to go on board docs, just go to the budget page and you can direct people to that. So that's there. Wanted to thank everybody for the hard work everyone did on the budget, and I understand everyone had to make some sacrifices and some compromise, and I think we did a really good job, and I just really personally want to thank everyone for doing that. And then just to bring you up to date, one new thing that the Finance Committee did at our last meeting that we'll be following up on each of our next subsequent meetings is that Howard and Nathan went through and consolidated all the various recommendations that were put together by our auditor and by Ed Gomo into a nice format, and we're going to be, they then came back and we went through the list and they explained to us which ones were high priority, which they were doing, which were on the list to do, which had to be pushed back a little bit. We had some discussion on it, so we'll be keeping track of that every month, and I think that's a great tool for us, and that is on board docs, and if anyone in the community wants to see it, you can direct them to that and they can see for themselves. So.
If I just wanted to add one thing that I think would be great, I know this was just completed today, but if this goes up on the budget page as well. Okay. So.
Well, actually, I did have one question. I don't know when to ask it, so I'm going to ask it now. So somewhere in the community are all sorts of signs that say support our schools, vote for our schools, those red signs. I have no idea where they are, and I was...
Friends of Education have them?
Linda Della Duca.
Okay, well, I know Linda Della Duca and Friends of Education, so I am wondering if we can get someone on the board to volunteer to take up the role of finding those signs and coordinating them, putting them somewhere where we can all get them and distribute them to ourselves. Brian, you are really busy. Do you want to?
I'd love to call that individual. I'll take that one.
Would you like to take that?
I will.
Would you and Brian like to work on it together and then just let us know
Mark,
where the signs are?
Mark, may I suggest you start with Chris Hood? It would be a good place to go, and I
Linda was
can give you
collecting them
his.
last year.
I can give you his.
Mark can do it, but I don't have to help.
Okay, and then Mark, just let us know, because I think in past years, what's happened is board members have gotten hold of some signs and passed them out in their neighborhoods, or maybe they have other people in their community that are willing to do it, but if we can look to you to coordinate that, that would be great.
Can I get one on my lawn?
Can you just wait a second? I don't even have one yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
Commissioner Kirk. ITC.
Oh, geez, I'm sorry. We just have one thing, past our minutes. I'm sorry. We just have one thing past our minutes. Our minutes are online. It's to approve contractors per Rule 6300 to be completed on March 2nd. It's really just process so that we can make sure that contractors can continue the work on the schools. It's part of a process. We just need approval to move forward on that. So,
Commissioner Shemsky.
Sorry, I didn't ask you ahead of time, but do you have an update on the Flynn sprinkler flooding, or I don't know if Paul does, it just like what the damage was, insurance covering it? I heard from parents this past weekend who were certainly frustrated. How long is this going to be an impact in the school?
I don't. What, Paul, do you have anything to add to that?
Is this on? I don't know. I wasn't going to speak to that. I was going to speak to the clarity in what we're asking the board to do with respect to the pre-authorization of contractors to bid on the project as per State Board of Ed Rule 6300. And what we're asking is that the board, who was supposed to pre-authorize the contractors for bidding for anything over $500,000, authorizes the ITC on or about March 2nd to act on their behalf to determine that the contractors have met the pre-authorization qualifications. The reason we're asking this is because there's a 30-day timeline for the bid process that can't begin until we have the pre-authorized contractors. We're also trying to make sure that we can get the bid process completed as early in April as possible, so we have the longest window to get the key ingredient, which right now is the elevator for Edmonds Elementary, installed in time during the summer so we can have time for school. So we're in a very short time frame. We've started the pre-authorization process by putting a notice in the newspaper for 60 days. That 60 days is up on March 2nd. So we're asking the board to authorize the ITC to meet and determine that the contractors have met the pre-authorization qualifications.
So if we can, before we take up your question, Scott, if we could get a motion to act on, would you make that motion, David?
A motion to approve contractor as per Rule 6300 to be completed on March 2nd.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Chena, and just for clarification, what we're doing is we're giving authority to ITC to do this pre-authorization so it doesn't have to come back to the full board. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposition? None. Superintendent Smith, Flynn, update.
On Flynn School, a sprinkler pipe burst in an area that didn't have sufficient interior heat, and it was near an exterior door, and a lot of cold air got in and froze a pipe, and it burst, and because it was a sprinkler pipe, it was under a fair amount of pressure. So even though it was caught relatively quickly, it would have happened after school somewhere in the late afternoon, but there were still after school people there, so they caught it. But by the time they caught it, a couple inches of water had actually accumulated on the floors in some spaces. Closest area was the library, was most directly affected, and then radiating out from the library were some smaller rooms that are used for various purposes, and a couple of classrooms. Everybody got right on it, and I have to really commend the operations staff, Marty, who's in charge of those folks, and his team got involved and brought in the people necessary to get the water up very quickly. Paul was on top of it as well, and the principal moved very quickly to put together a plan to relocate kids in the school building, which admittedly was inconvenient, but at least allowed things to continue while the cleanup was going on. The one program that was affected for the remainder of last week was an early education class where there just wasn't enough space. It was a morning class, so that was canceled for a couple of days. They were back as of Monday. As of Monday, most of the spaces were scheduled to be reoccupied, except for an area where they were doing some final cleanup, where the sheetrock had just gotten so saturated with water they had to keep drying it out. And also the library, because they had moved all the books, and in the process they got all jumbled up, and so we had the librarian had to kind of Dewey, for whom this decimal system is named, is rolling over in his grave as we speak as a result of what happened to the careful ordering of all those books. But I actually didn't have a chance to check today, but my understanding is the library should be back in operation, and pretty much everything should be back to normal by this point or within the next day or two.
Thank you.
Anything further, Commissioner Kirk?
Have anything further?
Okay. Commissioner Seguino.
Thanks. You all note that there were no minutes from the diversity and equity meeting, and that's because we had to change the date to meet regarding the superintendent, that the change at the last minute meant there was not a quorum at our meeting last week. But a few things did happen I wanted to share with you. One is that Nikki and her staff prepared a update on the strategic diversity and equity plan that they had put together this fall, telling us what they've achieved thus far this year and what some of the obstacles they face in implementing their plan fully. And That is posted under board docs for that meeting. There was also a PowerPoint, which I understand Nikki is going to post tomorrow, that really summarizes that if you want a shorthand, the Cliff Notes, as it were. And I think the two most significant issues in terms of obstacles were the instability in leadership as well as climate issues. But I encourage you all to look at that and to see what work has been done. Given the challenges, I think it's interesting, and there have been some steps forward. I want to just mention in advance that, as I understand it, the town meeting day means that the diversity and equity meeting for March is going to have to be displaced. And because of the size of our, right, it's a Tuesday night, it's the first Tuesday in March. And because of the size of our committee, a quorum issue might emerge again, and I would hope that we would be able to meet. So I'll be in touch with committee members so that we can hopefully avoid that. Third of all, I spoke to Superintendent Smith as well as to Nikki and her staff regarding the Equity and Inclusion Report, the annual report. And for those who don't know this, are newer to the board, a few years ago when the Diversity and Equity Committee was established, one of the first things that they asked of the school district was to present each year an equity and inclusion report card. It's now called a report, and it essentially measures the achievement gap in 5 areas: gender, socioeconomic status, ability, race, and ability. Did I say that? And ability. And it measures the achievement gap in a variety of areas. It is also supposed to measure issues regarding climate. And so 2 of those reports have been presented. Superintendent Smith and I and Nikki talked about hopefully using our April meeting for a presentation of this year's report, although that may not be feasible because of some constraints with the data. And if not in May, then, I'm sorry, if not in April, then it would be presented in May. So hopefully that can be achieved then. And I want to just speak to, if I might just take a moment to speak to the importance of that. I think this is an issue that's much bigger than our committee. And when I look at the data that was presented by the Champlain teachers, I think it's an indication of the kind of data that we as a board need to know if we're moving forward as a district. And this is really the only report that we have to monitor progress in the district. So I would hope folks would be interested in having a look at it and providing feedback on it and so forth, because at this moment it's our one way to evaluate how well our budget is working and how well we're meeting our goals. Thanks.
Can I just real quickly address one thing, that meetings still could take place on town meeting day. That would be up to the chair.
Okay.
They have taken place on town meeting day in the past, and that would be
Okay.
a discussion you should have with your committee.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Curry?
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you mentioned the presentation about Champlain, because I couldn't help wondering, with all that great data, if it was being tracked by socioeconomic status and race and gender and ability. And I mean, that kind of seems to me the way we integrate equity into our languages whenever we're collecting data, to do it by those categories just as a routine way of doing business.
Anything further?
No.
All right. Commissioner Truman?
So we made up for diversity and equities not having minutes by having 2 sets of minutes online, because I was late with December, so you'll find those. In the recent minutes, you'll see a rundown of where the GPA committee is going in terms of the conversations, which are basically, in a sense, evaluation process for the interim superintendent, and the beginnings of an outline for coming up with what, to overuse the word, an interim evaluation process for the first portion of the year when we have a permanent superintendent in place. I won't reiterate it, but if you've got questions, let me know now or later on. One of the first steps on that was a communication that went out to committee chairs asking that for this month's cycle of committee, or however they choose to handle it, to revisit their goals and see if there's anything that needs updating, revising, with things of how our world order has evolved over the last year or when those goals were set. And from that, we will work with, the interim superintendent to develop benchmarks and indicators that he would use to do his work over the next several months, and that the board, I can't say will, all I can say at this point is will be encouraged to, because it's a new board, to set up periods of time, monthly or otherwise, to meet with the superintendent and engage in conversation, get feedback from, and provide feedback to the interim superintendent on that. What we'll be bringing, hoping to bring to the board in March is a proposal of a timeline for an evaluation process for the permanent superintendent, timed with roughly 1 month after they commence their job, to carry through to the point in, I think it's end of March of 2016, when the process that's already in place in policy can then begin, and we can go through the normal procedure for the board. So there won't be any, as I was hopefully making sense to Commissioner Stoll in an email earlier, there's not going to be a need for any formal vote by the board, because we're not proposing a change in the evaluation policy. Future board may choose to do that, but it's more of, we'll have these other procedures in place so that, what the board has very clearly said, wanting to have that opportunity doesn't fall by the wayside because we can't meet a laid out timeline of policy. We've got, and thank you, Superintendent Smith, for reiterating this. We were bringing back for second reading. I'm sorry.
Commissioner Truman, quick question from Commissioner Curry here.
Sorry to interrupt. I wasn't clear on, I thought our committee had discussed in March having an evaluative conversation with the superintendent. Was that was part of our decision last month?
I may not be recalling that correctly. That doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong, so we'll
Yeah, I thought,
chat online and propose.
So what I understood, and I think it's in the minutes, is that we had tagged March for an evaluative conversation because this board, after March, would be gone, and that the idea was to capture this board's feedback for the superintendent.
I'm looking forward to our conversation over the next couple of days to nail that down, and we'll be communicating with the board in full about what we have. But I have not yet had any discussion with the superintendent of, once we're getting in the goal information, to feed that back in. My understanding was we were gathering that together through the cycle for committees to meet in, this month, which, including our committee, would be at the end of the month, and then taking that and putting it together and presenting it. But you may be correct, it's been a very long day. The last session, we passed first reading on 2 policies that Hal Colston was addressing earlier. We're bringing it up to the full board for second and final reading, but because we are a couple of days short of the formal 30 days required between readings, I'm proposing a motion that we waive that requirement so that we can have consideration of final reading of these policies. I'll make the motion and then can address it more. So I'm going to move that the board waive the requirement stated in policy BF, board policy development, that a policy amendment not be amended in less than 2 public meetings conducted at least a month apart for policies A4, equal opportunity and non-discrimination, and F1R, prevention of harassment of students. As unusual circumstances exist, as more, well, I'm not sure if that's part of it. I'll stop there. That's the motion.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Giannoni? Can you speak to a quick explanation, Commissioner Truman, as to why we need to waive the 30 days?
Yes, these policies are initiated as a part of a settlement, as we discussed last month, related to the discrimination and harassment. It's much in keeping as in the spirit of cooperation that led to this settlement, that we want to make sure that these are in place as soon as possible, and I feel that we have an obligation to do so.
This is directly relevant to the one public comment you had.
Yes.
And if I'm correct, there was no discussion or votes against the first reading, is that correct? Any further questions for Commissioner Truman on waiving the 30-day window? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Commissioner Truman?
I make a motion for second reading and the adoption of, sorry, I'm using Commissioner Kirk's laptop. Thank you for that, by the way. Mine is hopefully at home being used for homework. Move second reading and adoption of the proposed amendments to Policy A4, Equal Employment Opportunity and Non-Discrimination, as more fully described in the attached copy of Policy A4.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Giannoni? Did you care to speak to it? Any questions, discussion? All in favor of second reading of Policy A4, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Commissioner Truman?
I move second reading and the adoption of the proposed amendments to Policy F1R, Policy on the Prevention of Harassment of Students, as more fully described in the copy that, well, I'll stop there. It's too much wording in what was supposed to be the motion. You will find more fully described information in the attached copy.
Can we have a second for the motion? Commissioner Giannoni? Care to speak to it, Commissioner Truman? Any discussion or questions? All in favor of second reading of and adoption of Policy F1R, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. Anything further? All right. It's before 9:30. Yes, Commissioner Scrivano?
I had a question that I wanted to pose to the superintendent when I was discussing the Diversity and Equity Committee. Most of you know that one of the goals of the Diversity and Equity Committee this year was to work on reducing disparities, discipline disparities. And we have been under some discussions about a listening tour and a variety of other mechanisms to gather more information. The superintendent has initiated an effort to address some issues around diversity, around behavior, and promoting kind of alternative approaches to this. And I wonder if you would be willing to describe to the board what you've been undertaking with the school district.
Sure. One of the things, and this is directly related to one of the areas of focus that we identified under diversity and equity, was an initiative designed to pull together the different documents that we use throughout the district at the elementary level and at different elementary schools, middle school and high school, around issues related to student conduct and discipline, and come up with a cohesive K-12 framework that reflects consistent themes, isn't in conflict with the themes that and the areas of emphasis that we feel should be most prominent in guiding our response to discipline and the work that we do in that area. Also, it's an opportunity. Some of the documents that we have are dated and needed to be brought up to speed in terms of current, even in some cases, current law and current practice around discipline and student behavior. It's also an opportunity to weave into the fabric of what the document that guides us, those things that have been kind of floating around in the periphery, like PBIS, restorative justice. If those are going to be ultimately considered to be serious elements of what we do, they can't continue to exist as thought of as some separate initiative. They need to be integrated into the structure of what we do. So we've undertaken a process. We've established a K-12 committee to begin that work. It can be the type of thing you would easily spend an entire year on, and we've just started it. So we've set a somewhat ambitious goal of having a working draft by the end of the year that we can use to, at least on a trial basis, to kind of try to debug it going forward. And we'll see how close we get to that. A lot of good work has been done in diverse districts throughout the country. There are a lot of good models that we can rely upon. So it's not as if we have to sit down and work from scratch. And there are also some basic elements of the documents that we have that are still valid and and would continue to be part of what we come up with. So once we have an initial draft of what we think this is going to look like, we'll pause and we'll make it publicly available and so that anybody can comment on it, but we'll also specifically reach out to various constituent groups to get their feedback, students and staff, board members, other community parents, and so on, before we go further with it, to see if it strikes people as being fair and reasonable. Hopefully it will reflect some proactive approaches, not just reactive notions around dealing with issues related to student conduct. So I hope it's not wishful thinking to think we'll get where we'd like to be by the end of the year in terms of a working draft that would be actually usable for next year. People are interested in it. This was not something that we had to contrive or something that was the sort of the classic, comes from the central office and everybody, oh God, we got to do this. People were ready. They had already identified this as a need. They just needed the catalyst to just get started with it. So that's where we are with the larger initiative. In addition to that, we've been looking specifically, another goal, area of focus had to do with an equity impact analysis around suspensions and also looking at efforts to reduce out-of-school suspensions as a tool, because it's not supported as a particularly useful tool. If it worked, we wouldn't have as many repeat offenders as we do who continue to be out of school. Which isn't to say we have a large number necessarily as a portion of our population anyhow, but nonetheless it's an issue. And we've started a process of trying to make some incremental changes in our approach to out-of-school suspension, beginning with insistence on certain consistent practices, starting with the reminder that it is a last resort option, acknowledging and being very clear on the only areas really that would be considered, the types of issues that would be considered as appropriate triggers for out-of-school suspension, which at this point are violence, physical violence, drugs or weapons. Those are still the areas that pretty much go anywhere, and regardless of what else you do, there's usually need for some separation connected with those kinds of incidents. But the other, what we've established as a non-negotiable is a customized reentry process. Well, two things. One, that if it's not at school, it's not. We're looking for alternatives than it to be at home, for obvious reasons, and so that it's supervised in some way, and that there's schoolwork and other work involved, and then during that time, a customized reentry plan is developed that is specific to the circumstances surrounding that student and looking at other factors that may have contributed to why it happened, with an eye towards what you can do differently and what the student can do differently going forward to try to reduce the likelihood that it happens again. All of this stuff happens to one degree or another, but not as consistently as we would like. And so that's where we are right now, as recently as Monday, a meeting that we had. And we also agreed that we had to be a little clearer. The next meeting of the planning room coordinators, or the folks that work with students who need to spend some time outside of the classroom meetings of our schools, will be for the purpose of looking at consistency and how incidents are classified to make sure it's the same, and so we can do apples to apples comparisons from one school to the next and have accurate records around the kinds of behaviors that we're all calling the same behavior, using the same terminology, recording it in the same box, that type of thing. It seems obvious, but again, when you have multiple schools, it's ripe for multiple interpretations. And our goal is to make it as consistent as possible. So we're looking at cleaning up data, cleaning up procedures. So we're not waiting for the updated overall document to address the specifics around suspension. There are a lot of issues that you can get into, and we're having to I use the word discipline in another sense, discipline ourselves to not bite off more than we can chew. And there's enough work around cleanup work, frankly, around suspension, that I think that's the one that we want to continue to focus on this year. because it is something that's manageable. We're not overrun with the numbers. We should be able to do that right. And there's, again, I'm not running into any resistance on the part of people to take this on and improve the approach that we use in addressing it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Chena?
So I just wanted to clarify that it's across the district in every school?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Stoll?
Just a comment. So, in preparing the committee that's working on it, do you have some representatives on it that are very familiar with the special ed regulations? Because children who are on special ed plans actually have special protections around suspension, and I would be interested in knowing whether those special protections are being applied around the district. If so, how? So I just wanted to put a plug in for checking out that.
And one of the next meeting will be to divide up into work groups to look at specific issues, and one of the subgroups will deal specifically not just with special education, but with any other regulations, even case law that we should be aware of in order to make sure that we don't have procedures that could be challenged just because they're technically incorrect.
Thank you.
Entertain a motion for adjournment. Commissioner Chena, seconded by Commissioner Clayman. All in favor of adjournment? Opposed? We're adjourned.